So good afternoon, distinguished delegates, dear colleagues, participants following us online and attending here in person, and welcome to the session, Finance Flowing to Accelerate Climate Action, Innovation and Partnership. My name is Giorgia Rambelli. I'm the coordinator for climate policy and energy governance at the European Secretariat of ICLEI, Local Government for Sustainability. And it will be my pleasure to moderate, or better co-moderate, the discussion of today. The session of today is organized by ICLEI, Local Government for Sustainability, with the support of the European Union funded project Urban LEDS, jointly implemented by UN Habitat and ICLEI, and with the support of the Transformative Action Program. So trillions of dollars will be required in these decades to support cities in building the low emission resilient infrastructure necessary to mitigate climate change. According to the World Bank, and as urbanization is rapidly increasing, the cost to provide and protect the needed infrastructure is estimated to be between 11 and 20 billion annually by 2050. To further unpack the scale of the investment needed, zooming in on Europe and the situation in the European continent, for example, according to the 100 climate neutral and smart cities by 2050 mission, the transformation process to climate neutrality for 100 European cities with an average of 100,000 inhabitants is estimated to cost about 1 billion investment per city in euros. This represents, of course, a great challenge for local governments, which, as the closest level to citizens, are at the forefront when it comes to deliver on the transition to carbon neutral and resilient societies. So over the past 2 years, as the pandemic has spread across the world, of course, we have seen how the fiscal health and the capacity of local governments have even been more tested by the situation. So while many strides have been indeed made in securing better access to funding, lack of direct access to international funds, limited capacity and competence to apply, but also to manage and to monitor funds available and to design bankable projects remain a key issue that local governments worldwide are facing. So before we start, I would like to invite all the participants, and in particular the colleagues online, to join the discussion by posting their comments and questions using slido.com. Join us by scanning the QR code that you can see right now on the screen, or by entering the code on the website slido.com directly. So now going back to our session, we would like to give you a little bit of a flavor for what the discussion will be looking like in a few minutes. So we are going to be providing with a platform for discussion of the following questions. What are the key challenges the local and subnational governments are still facing when it comes to access finance? And what solution have they successfully implemented? We are going to dig into the opportunities and the perspective of financial institutions and what solutions are being provided to support and to materialize the climate action at local and subnational level. And then finally, we are going to discuss all together how can we accelerate this access to climate finance, and what are the next practical steps that are needed in terms of cooperation to ensure that this is really happening. So to navigate these questions, it is my pleasure now to introduce my co-moderator, Esther Mojeroshi. She will be joining us online, and you can see her now on the screen. She's the head of innovation finance at the ICLEI World Secretariat. So Esther, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Georgia, and welcome everyone. I'm really very much honored to be here and to be the co-moderator of this session. Not to take too much from your time, I also would like to address in a few minutes what I find very important why we are here today and why I'm particularly happy this session is happening. So before giving the floor to our keynote speaker and co-organizer, as head of the innovative finance at ICLEI, and in this capacity, I'm working with local governments on a daily basis, helping them with their project preparation, trying to find the most suitable way for them to access finance, and to have such dialogues as we are having today, bringing together the different actors, the local governments, but also financial institutions and financing experts together. This is, I believe, the way to find together how to scale up finance for local action. I also wanted to thank you, the European Commission, for its continuous support, and that through the Urban LEDS project, it's possible to gather here today. And Urban LEDS is obviously much more than just this event. And also, it was a flagship project of ICLEI in the past years. And even now that the project is ending, I believe that all the knowledge that we gathered during those years, and also the tools that we developed, they will remain helpful and useful. And also the Transformative Actions Program, Georgia also already referred to the so-called TAP, which is an ICLEI-led project pipeline and the project preparation facility, will continue supporting local governments with building up bankable projects and accessing finance. Just a bit of promotion, the annual call for application is now open, and somehow we will post the link either on Slido or on Hopin. I'm sure our events team will find the best way to do that. And now that the Urban LEDS ends, of course, obviously, as always, new projects start, and among which I would like to highlight now the EU-funded Smart Energy Solutions for Africa, the SESA. This project just kicked off, and the main goal is to enhance the flow of financial resources for sustainability in the African continent. This is with the engagement of European companies, and the SESA will facilitate a structured co-development process for sustainable energy solutions, starting from energy access innovations that have high potential for take-up and testing. We will hear about other opportunities today, also from our financing expert, but not to take more from your time and from our speakers to share their experience. I would like to give the floor now to our keynote speaker, Bernhard Barth, Program Coordinator for Climate Change and Urban Environment at UN Habitat. Bernhard has been a member of UN Habitat's climate change team since 2008 in various functions, including since 2013 as coordinator of the program in the Asia-Pacific region. Bernhard, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Georgia and Esther. My pleasure to be here. If the slides can be put up. Next slide. Next slide, yeah. And maybe next slide. So let me start by framing climate finance. You all have probably seen this complex diagram, and there are just a few key messages that I would highlight right now. Climate finance, first of all, is not equally distributed between adaptation and mitigation. There's a very strong emphasis on mitigation, clearly taking the upper hand. And out of the $30 billion that you see here, that is for adaptation annually, only $4 billion goes to cities. Of course, a lot of talk at the COP is about the $100 billion pledge, but we also know that that's only one small part of the existing finance that is around at the moment, the international finance for developing countries, but even that is not enough. We've heard some of the figures, and depending on who estimates, but the $3 trillion for infrastructure globally is what is generally accepted as a ballpark. Next slide. So I've just highlighted a few key challenges that we see at UN Habitat in terms of urban climate finance. There's very often the question, is there enough finance around theoretically, but the projects are not good enough. You hear that very often, that it's the capacities of cities only. If only they had perfect projects, finance would be available. I think the other big conversation that we're having at the moment is that climate finance, how does that relate to development finance? How does that relate to COVID-19 recovery finance? Can that be merged, or is that really just a rhetoric and a dream? But I think given that there is probably very little finance around, this is certainly one priority, to find that alignment and make every dollar stretch, covering multiple demands. We've talked about some of the other issues, the limited mandate of cities, therefore not having the access to finance, the bankable projects that are not there, the capacities very often, the challenges not to be able to develop good prioritized projects that really hit all of the marks in terms of climate change adaptation and mitigation is another. Environmental and social safeguards become stricter every year and are very often challenging for cities in the global south to comply with. And in the small print, that goes back to my earlier point, is that the methodologies for earmarked climate finance are reasonably well developed for mitigation projects, but they are not well developed for resilience projects. Very often the argument is this project is development, not climate resilience, therefore it cannot be funded. But I think increasingly there is an acceptance that there is a fine line, if at all, between resilience and development. Next slide. Just a few very quick highlights here on what we, for example, at UN Habitat do in terms of climate finance. Very often, of course, our emphasis is on the upstream development, increasingly really from initial citywide planning to the development of prioritized design or subsidy projects and getting those developed into bankable project and taking them through finance, through the funds that were mentioned, but also through investment fora. We are also increasingly engaged in research and bringing partnerships together to better understand finance mechanism, what works, what doesn't work. We recently held the Innovate for Cities conference. Finance was a key track in there. We've talked about the Urban LEDS project that co-sponsors this event. Multi-level governance is key there. And of course, it's about enabling environments, and we engage there, including through support to NDCs, to NAPs, and other national frameworks like national urban policies that we hope can support local finance. We also focus in particular on climate resilience for the urban poor, get international climate finance into that, and we're looking at the development of guidelines for cities in developing countries. And let me finish then with the next slide. So some of the recommendations that we have is to really break down that dichotomy between resilience and development. That should not be a hindrance to getting finance to cities. At the same time, maybe the other side of the coin is that every investment needs to be climate finance. Every investment needs to be a climate investment. There cannot be projects that are not scrutinized in terms of how they contribute to greenhouse gas emission reductions or resilience building. Then there are more the financial mechanisms for getting cities access. We've talked about the capacity development at the city level. The gap between the planning and the implementation, too many projects that are being planned to a certain stage but are not carried forward to finance and to implementation is critical. And last but not least, we need to make sure that every dollar, pound, yen, euro, or whatever the local currency is, ticks every box in terms of climate, in terms of social justice, in terms of economic development, and in terms of COVID-19 recovery. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bernard, for getting us started with all of this food for thought. I think your point about how mitigation adaptation should be integrated and combine the activities, but although they are the same kind of, you use the metaphor of the two sides of the same coin applied in a different way, but still, although these two measures are somehow two sides of the same coins, there is still quite a difference in the way that they can be financed and the investment can be accessed for our cities when it comes to really implement action in these two sectors. And thank you also for reminding us about the essential role of enabling environments for this type of activities as investment, in particular, already pinpointing the role the multi-level governance has to play, in addition to all the other partnership cooperations, of course, to really deliver on our expectation to implement climate action. And ultimately, I would like to end with a little bit of a spotlight on the Innovate for Cities conference. There are quite a few results coming out of the conference, and definitely I would invite everyone, both here with us and online, to check out the results and really the wealth of incredible results that have been presented during that conference. So a little bit of homework to bring home with you following this session. But now I would like to hear a little bit by the people that are trying to implement in practice these different projects and the hurdles and the challenges, but also the solutions they have been finding for their own local governments in implementing access to finance. And it's my pleasure to introduce to you our first three panelists that will help us navigate a little bit this discussion around challenges. So the first one is Arno Bronte, the Vice Mayor of the City of Rotterdam from the Netherlands, who is joining us online. The second speaker is Angel Mazia. She's the Director of Environmental and Solid Waste Management at the Steve Tshwete Municipality from South Africa. And then finally here in person, and I would love to welcome you to the stage with us, is Nicolas Arena. He's the Secretary of the Ministry of Environment of Envigado in Colombia. So thank you for being with us in person. So I would like to trigger our discussion now by asking a first question to my three panelists. And I would like to ask you, what are the main barriers and the constraining factors that you've faced so far in securing, but also in accessing the finance for your local climate projects? And I would like to ask maybe Arno to get us started with this conversation. Arno, welcome and thank you for being with us. What are the challenges that you're finding in Rotterdam?
Yeah, thanks a lot. And I'm glad that I can join you here online from Rotterdam. As you know, probably Rotterdam is the second biggest city in the Netherlands, and we have got a huge port and a huge industry. So there's a lot of CO2 emitted in Rotterdam, but also a lot of opportunities to reduce the amount of CO2. Your question is, what are the main challenges if it comes to financing? Actually, there are two. First thing is we have a lot of local initiatives, a lot of companies, a lot of organizations need finance to take part in the energy transition, but they don't know how to get the finance, how to come in contact with international organizations, with international funds. That is one problem. And the other problem is the international funds who do have the money are not always able to find the right initiatives, the right companies to fund the ideas that can really help to accelerate the energy transition. And we as a local government try to bring these two parties together. So the international funding and the companies and initiatives who need the funding for their projects. And for that, actually, we needed to identify two things. First of all, what does the city of Rotterdam and the economy of Rotterdam really needs to accelerate the energy transition? And for that, we made a strategy together with more than 100 companies and organizations and thousands of local citizens, which we call our climate approach. And this is a roadmap how we are going to implement the energy transition in the next 10 years. So first of all, we needed the big picture. And then we try to identify what individual companies really need to make their products come true. So for example, to identify, do they need just a loan or maybe a subsidy or maybe some technical support, and also to help them to bring forward what their individual project would add to the energy transition, not only in Rotterdam, but also on the national level. So these were the two things we have identified. We provide a lot of companies also with technical assistance, organizational assistance, but first and foremost also the advice on how to get access to the international funding, and also how to make a proposal that also add something and will be needed to get the right funding, either a loan or a subsidy from an international organization, either European Investment Bank or the European Commission. And by doing so, we not only helped our local companies, but also the international organizations to get the right funding. And yeah, we are already a few years on the way to get the energy transition done in the city of Rotterdam.
Thank you very much, Arno, for taking us through the experience of Rotterdam, and also for starting to talk about also another dimension of the financing and access to finance, which is how do we also enable our private sector, our small companies, our society and civic organizations on the ground to help us implement truly the type of transition that we need to secure our climate neutrality targets. So thank you for your experience. And now I would like to hear a little bit from Angel, from your side. What is your experience in a completely different parts of the world? What are the challenges? Are they similar? Are they different? What are the barriers that you're still facing in accessing finance?
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. From our local municipality, we do have a few local climate change projects that are in the pipeline, and also we've implemented a few projects through the assistance of the private sector and ICLEI. So the local municipality is mandated, amongst other functions, to deliver basic services to the community, such as water, sewer, electricity, and waste management, removal and management. So when we have to prioritize the projects, you'll find that most of the requests that are even coming from the ground from our community, they are aligned to such services, because those services are related to their day-to-day needs, unlike the climate change related issues, because climate change is still a far-fetched concept to our local people. So they will be prioritizing issues to do with the service delivery, and we as the officials, we understand that what is climate change? It is real. We need to do something now. We will be initiating, we will be proposing projects, and we will be submitting our proposals. The community will be bringing their proposals, which are mostly linked to service delivery. And then we have to go through the process of approvals through the council and the budgeting, identify the projects, prioritize them, and get the funding. So in most cases, the climate change programs or projects are getting the least allocation, or they find themselves at the end of the list of the prioritization, because there's pressure to deliver on the services. Because even when we go out to reach out to people, that is what they will tell us, to say we need this, but because they are not really educated much, or they are not really aware of what is going on in terms of the climate change, and then it doesn't get at priority. And the other thing is, we do get private organizations that want to do something, but they are not sure where to go to get funding or to be assisted. And then we try to advise them where we can, to say where can they get funding, what is it that they need to do in order to get funding. So when we are busy working on our projects, the manner in which at least we secure funding is through direct council, where we have to submit our proposal to get a buy-in from council. We have to plan for the outer years. We budget for the outer years to be allocated. in a long-term plan, a 5-year term. And then we have to apply for grants where possible. So we do get some we don't get, but we do take opportunity in those grants when they come up. And because we know that as municipalities, we are working with a limited budget, we have to think out of the box to say, this is the little that we have as the municipality, and it's not sufficient to do all that which the municipality must do and also get the most climate projects prioritized. We have to go out, whatever opportunity comes with the private sector, we are open to it, to engage, to partner, to investigate, to do the studies for whatever that is feasible to be implemented. So we are open-minded to partner so that we get assistance in terms of implementing such projects. We also look at implementing some projects in partnership with our local communities. There are some projects that you can implement without requiring a capital budget. We cannot sit and say we don't have funds as the municipality, we don't have capital budget, but we can do something that which doesn't require a budget if we partner with other structures. So in terms of maybe advising what the other local government can do, is that you have to come up with a viable strategies to get council buy-in. You have to show them return in investment and economic stimulation, including the issues of job creation in the project that we are proposing, so you can get a buy-in from the council. You have to look at other funding sources, such as grants, as we do on our case, as such opportunities come, and look at other private funders to completely fund the project or go for blended finance for that matter. So you have to make sure you conduct your feasibility studies if needs be, and prepare the bankable business proposal, and then you make your applications to different funding institutions. And the private sector as well can be brought in to implement your projects as a PPP agreement with the municipality. And as I've said, you can work with the communities to implement the projects. That doesn't really require capital budget, but just people to get involved. And
thank
also,
you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much, Angel, for your experience. You can see from what Angel has been sharing with us why we are so proud of calling Steve Twete one of our municipalities in urban LEDs, of course. But now I wanted to give the floor and to continue our virtual journey from South Africa, going to Latin America. And I would like to give the floor to Nicholas now to tell us a little bit about the experiences on the main barriers and constraints that the city of Envigado is actually facing.
Good afternoon. One of the main barriers to securing funding for local climate projects is to ensure that the interests of expectation of project implements with the global governments are aligned with the interests of the project funding agencies, as both parties need to coincide, keeping in mind that they have a common interest. Local governments aim to develop climate projects according to the particular reality of their territory, but project financiers may have other priorities to achieve the common goals. The key will be to aim greater flexibility in the action plans of climate investment funds that allow our local governments to adapt their territories to those same action plans. The second drawback is the lack of knowledge of local governments about the operation of international climate investment funds. It makes it difficult to carry out or execute specific projects in each territory because most of the time are conditioned to the financing of the local government themselves, which is scarce. For this reason, communication policies should be developed to widely disseminate the structure and operation of multilateral financial funds. The policies of the international funds contemplate in a reduced way the participation of local governments in the design of their investment policies. It is required be more inclusive with the realities of the territories. This will increase local governance with the participation of citizens in the structuring of investment projects and important that's synergy that allows to defend the action of climate change for each of the citizen, generating in turn greater confidence in the funds to see materialize all projects. Another possible drawback is the fact that technical problems may arise in the presentation of the projects, since they require high standards of participation, which is not a bad thing, since we must be subordinate to the excellence. But it will be important to achieve a specific training for local governments or the standards of participation or application to the financial funds.
Thank you very much, Nicolas, for sharing your experience and your thoughts, and also for clearly outlining what some of the challenges that you are facing still are, and the proposal of strengthening the capacity for local governments to meet these requirements and these criteria as a very important step to take to be able to also access finance better for local and subnational entities, of course. But now we have the pleasure to hear a little bit more from financial institutions. So we talked about what the needs and the challenges are for our local governments. We would like now to hear what the response is from the other side, let's say, and to understand a little bit better what the opportunities are. So Esther, I think you're going to take us through this interesting and challenging dialogue as well. So I would like to give you the floor, and I'm really curious to see what our colleagues from the financial institution can share with us.
Thank you so much, Georgia. And indeed, let me welcome you, our speakers. Augustin Maria, who is Program Manager at the World Bank City Climate Finance Gap Fund. And also let me welcome you, Jean-François Beau, who is the Executive Director at FMDV, the Global Fund for Cities Development. So I think, yeah, it was really excellent that the city speakers already touched some of the questions we wanted to discuss together with our speakers, with our financial experts today. Cities mentioning how important is it to get the right funding, and how open-minded you have to be. And here, I hope we can also bring you some opportunities that you can then consider for your projects. So starting with Augustin from the World Bank. So why is the name the GAP Fund? It's a very unusual name of a project preparation facility. So can you tell us a bit more about it, and also how this is different from other project preparation facilities that you offer?
Well, thank you very much. So the gap that the GAP Fund is trying to bridge is this capacity gap at the early stage of project identification and preparation, where cities really need to turn their ideas into projects that are ready to be financed and implemented. And this echoes the gap between planning and implementation that Bernard was mentioning in his opening speech. So we do see that the cities are at the center of the climate change challenge, and that transforming cities will be essential to achieving the goals of the Paris Agreement. At the same time, we do see that cities struggle to develop the projects that we need to make this this change a reality. And this is especially true in rapidly urbanizing countries like South Africa and other countries, where the way cities will develop in the coming years will really determine the trajectory in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, but also in terms of vulnerability to the negative impacts of climate change. And it's great to see that cities are ready to act. We see that more than 6,000 cities have already prepared climate action plans, but we need more. The cities that have prepared climate action plans represent around 1/5 of the urban population. We need more, and we need those plans to translate into action. And that's where the GAP Fund comes to support the cities turning those climate ambitions into action. And so the type of activities that we support range from the development of strategies and plans down to early stage of project identification and preparations topic, stopping at pre-feasibility study, assuming that we already have project preparation facilities like the TAP or the CFF that can onboard projects when they reach this more advanced level of project identification. So this specific focus is really what makes the GAP Fund unique. Another thing that makes the GAP Fund unique is the partnership network. The origin of the GAP Fund is the identification of this capacity gap that I was mentioning earlier, that really came from our partners, the city networks like ICLEI, C40, global initiatives like GCOM, CCFLA. And so this is really from the cities and the city networks as their representatives that this gap emerged. And as a result, the GAP Fund is structured around a strong partnership platform that includes our donors. So we have the government of Germany and the government of Luxembourg, and we are actively looking for additional partners to join the initiative. We have the city networks, and we have two implementing agencies, the World Bank and the European Investment, working in partnership. And after 1 year of operation, we have really demonstrated that this collaborative model works. We have today received more than 160 expressions of interest. We are already supporting more than 35 cities, and we're hoping to support a total at least 180 cities over the coming 4 years. So I would say this is a model that has been tested, that works, and I encourage the cities to apply. We have a One GAP Fund website, citygapfund.org, where cities can access the information on the eligibility criteria, the type of support that we can provide, and they can download the expressions of interest and submit those expressions of interest online. And World Bank and EIB, we meet every 2 weeks to jointly screen the expressions of interest and then decide who from the World Bank or the EIB will follow up with the city. So we are open for business. We accept expressions of interest on a rolling basis. So please go to our website and please apply.
Thank you so much, Augustin. Very inspiring. And I think my colleagues already posted the GAP Fund website on Hopin or on Slido, the most suitable platform to all the participants. And I indeed find it very important, also based on our experience with the Transformative Actions Program, to support already this very early stage of project preparation. And we also brought here today another expert, Jean-Francois, who is now representing here the IMIF, the International Municipal Investment Fund, which is also supporting project preparation and also investing in those projects. So Jean-Francois, if you could also tell us a bit about how the IMIF operates, and of course, also feel free to add a few words on what FMDV is doing for project preparation.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Esther, and hi everyone. I'm Jean-François Abaud, the Executive Director of FMDV. So FMDV is the global network of local governments dedicated to promote and develop solutions to better invest and finance in cities. Just maybe before going to my presentation, Esther, does David Jackson is there, or I will speak alone of IMIF?
No, unfortunately, he didn't arrive.
Okay, no problems. Just to see if
go ahead.
things are not. Yeah. Okay, so I think what is very interesting is that hearing from different speakers, from the keynote speakers, from Angel, from Augustin, and others, we do share the same approach, and I think this is quite reassuring to see that we are going on the same direction based on the same observation of the failure on investing in cities. The only thing maybe to add to what has been said on being able to provide bankable projects and to connect the needs of the project from the city to the finance is also maybe to see how to organize this project preparation support. Because in Europe, for example, a city is providing a political vision on the need of the territory. The administration is organizing it into a kind of first frame of projects. But after that, they are recruiting external expertise in order to make it bankable and make it connected to donors. While in emerging and developing countries, we are saying that cities are not able to develop bankable projects, but it's not their role. Their role is to give a political vision, to try to organize and to prioritize the actions, and then to have support to make those actions into concrete projects that can be attractive for donors, investors, and other financial stakeholders. It's what the GAP Fund is doing, it's what many project preparation are doing, and it's what the IMIF is also providing. So IMIF, the International Municipal Investment Fund, has been created by UCLG, UNCDF with the support of FMDV, and we have recruited an asset manager for the investment, which is Meridiam, a French investment companies that is well engaged on the urban infrastructure market. And there are two components in the IMIF. The first one, it's to provide technical assistance to cities in the same approach as the GAP Fund, to say, going from an idea or an action needed on the territory to a concrete project. So we are providing technical assistance on all the way of the project preparation cycle, from the early stage to the last mile. And we identify the needs, and we, together with UNCDF and UCLG, are mobilizing the appropriate expertise to work with the cities on site, but also from kind of technical support from virtual support, which is now working quite well. And the idea is to really reach the level of investability in order then to connect this project with Meridiam and to make a firewall between the technical assistance and the investment component, where Meridiam will assess with his own tools the project itself, can provide last mile, very last mile project preparation also for legal and really transactional preparation, and then can invest into capital into the project. The difference maybe between the others instrument and the IMIF itself is that IMIF is now investing through equity into projects. So it's really particular, but we make the choice not to provide loans where many donors and DFIs are providing very good instrument on that, but the private equities was a bit missing. So we want to push also cities to go to that kind of transaction. And Meridiam has just finalized the capitalization of the first tranche for 290 million euros last month. And there is another tranche that will double the capitalization of the fund. And we are now in the process of providing technical assistance to the first pilot projects in order then to present them to Meridiam in the coming months. And we try to continue to work with others, other network of cities and other initiatives such as ICLEI and TAP, with whom we are working very closely in order to feed constantly the pipeline of projects and to see where the needs are, how can we bring technical assistance, and then in order to connect with the investment component. So I will stop there because I think my time is overdue, but open to questions, and thanks a lot again for the invitation.
Thank you so much, Jean-Francois, and great that you just said open for questions, because indeed we are now entering in the second part, in the third part of the discussions, and this also includes the Q&A. So this part will be moderated by Georgia, but just to take the opportunity to also encourage you to put your questions in the Slido. The link was shared with you, and maybe we can share the link again with the code, just to be sure that everybody has it who joined later. So this is where we will collect all the questions. And with this, I would like to hand it over to Georgia to moderate the panel discussion on how to scale up local climate action.
Thank you very much, Esther. Of course, it will be a co-moderation, so please feel free to let me know anytime that you see an interesting and even a pushy, perhaps even a little bit of a challenging question popping up in the chat and in Slido. I think it's quite important that we also ask ourselves the tough questions today. But speaking of tough questions, I don't know if it's tough, Arno, but maybe I would like to start with you, if that's okay. And in particular, I will be interested to hear your perspective around around the access to finance. So Jean-Francois was mentioning how in Europe there is this political leadership, and Rotterdam has amazing targets and a structured plan on how they want to really embed throughout the life of the city the energy and transition and transformation to climate neutrality. But in particular, he was also mentioning how European cities are working with the private sector to also implement some of these steps. So maybe I would like to hear a little bit your thoughts around your perspective, how this is being done and how it has been to work with the private sector to really implement this vision and this political commitment.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. For us, it's a crucial part in the energy transition to have a close cooperation with the private sector. Because if you speak about funding, most of the investments actually have to come from the private sector. The only role we can play as a local government or international funds is to help this huge funding come through. So we can actually help the private investors get some confidence in new and sustainable projects. But the major part of the investments has to come from also private investors. So that's the reason why in our energy transition strategy, in our roadmap, we have outlined that together with the small companies, but also the big companies, actually all the companies in Rotterdam and also in the port, because these are the companies who actually are going to take the actions that are needed. And the next step was to work together with the regional government and also the national government to get an aligned strategy, an aligned narrative for the energy transition in our region. And that made it also easier for international funders like the European Investment Bank or the European Commission to fund the energy transition and the particular projects that needed funding in Rotterdam.
Thank you very much also for underlining not just how you have been working with the private sector, but this important item of aligning as much as possible this local strategy with the other level, let's say with the subnational, with the national, and how it can be a powerful instrument to also access finance. And maybe I would like to ask then a follow-up question to Nicolas, and in particular ask him about we just mentioned now how developing a roadmap, a sustainable strategy can be a powerful way to access finance as much as possible. How do you think that this type of roadmap and strategy can support the process? Do you think they are an important element to become attractive for the finance sector?
We believe that the way to implement climate action should be a path that's a start for the local territories, looking for a common objective, creating support networks with neighboring local governments with whom a common environment typology is shared, achieving a greater impact each age of their own territories. The municipality of Envigado has developed for years action for the conservation and sustainability of the territory, with such clear examples as the bi-municipal agreement. We have declared about 40% of our territory as a protected area in which construction projects that deteriorate cannot be developed. Since 2018, we have been part of ICLEI, who have found in our city an organized territory with solid environmental values, and who invited us to participate on the Urban LEDS 2 project, funded by the European Commission and implement side by side with ICLEI and ONU Habitat, with the aim of accelerating climate action in Latin American cities through low emissions urban development strategies. Also implementing a photovoltaic structure that generate all the energy requirements of the facilities of the Secretariat of Environment in Envigado. Energy efficiency is part of the development plan of our mayor, which propose to replace 100% of the public light in our city with LED lamps, a project that is already being developed and will be completed before the end of the terms of this municipal government. The city of Envigado, together with 4 other cities in the Aburrá Valley, Sabaneta, Itagüí, Caldas, y La Estrella, has created the table for the conservation of the sur of the Aurora Valley, which is already producing results in favor of maintaining the ecological structure of our territory. This process has been chosen by ICLEI, considering as a model of articulation of the territory within the same territory. We hope to continue counting on the support of climate action financing funds, and we invite you to learn about Envigado's experience so that together we can work to reduce climate change. Thank you so much.
Many thanks for sharing the strategy and the many measures that Envigado is looking into and is trying to implement to reach this target, and also, of course, to have a strong case for accelerating implementation. Before I give the floor to our last panelist who just joined us, David Jackson is the Director for Local Development and Finance and the UN CDF. I would like to ask one more question to our local governments. So David, you can also hear, we are discussing about real life experiences and example from local governments. So hopefully that can also give you some good ideas on how we can really foster their access to finance. I would like to ask Angel maybe to share with us, if it's possible, a concrete example on how they manage in Steve Chuete to access finance for net zero and climate resilience projects. Just one example to give us a little bit the sense of how you are bringing this forward in your city.
Thank you so much. As we have been looking for programs to be implemented, or projects to be implemented, we identified one project for reclamation. In 2018, we have done a feasibility study for establishment of the material recovery facility, which is also known as MEF, in order to improve waste reclamation. Currently, we are only diverting 10% of recyclables in our municipality, and then the 90% of it is being sent to the landfill site. So we needed to improve on that. In the process, after we did the feasibility study in 2018, and then Italy came on board, they assisted us to apply for funding on the TAP application. When we applied on the TAP application, we were using the feasibility study that we did ourselves before we worked with Italy on this project. And then Italy came on board, and then we did an optimized solution that was developed by us in Italy, Africa, that makes use of double shift on operation of the MEF in order to maximize the output capacity, and the blended finance solution was looked into to close the affordability gap. So the greenhouse gas emissions reductions were modeled for a 32-ton-day MEF during the development of the municipal waste diversion strategy before we worked with Italy. And the plan was to work on that facility for a 15-year period. And then when we then developed a concept note with Italy, we had to double the output, and then we worked on a plan for a 30-year period. which was also doubling the greenhouse gas reductions as well in that manner. And the concept note was circulated to AFD and the DPSA in April 2021. So the AFD expressed an interest in funding feasibility studies, and the hope is that AFD will be willing to fund revised feasibility study that will conclude on the viability of the optimized scenario and the amount of grant funding required to close the affordability gap. So we are looking at that the revised feasibility study that is required will have to conclude on the financial and technical viability of the optimized solution that was developed by Italy Africa with us. So it will have to look into optimizing CapEx, capital budget and operational budget for that project, and also to increase it to 16 hours a day operations in order to maximize the output instead of the planned 8 hours that was initial planned. Then it will have to look into confirming the market prices and demand for recyclables, and confirm the likely output volumes of the MEF, and also consider the scaling options in line with the waste growth and the landfill volumes, and also quantify the grant required to close the affordability gap, assuming a blended finance solution will be an option then. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Angel, for sharing this concrete example. And now I would like to ask Esther if you also want to welcome David on our panel and to give you the first shot, of course, for a question to him.
Yeah, David, many thanks for joining us. Very happy that you made it. So yeah, Jean-François already spoke about the IMIF, so we already have a brief overview on what you are doing, but we are very much eager to hear from you also beyond the IMIF, from the UNCDF perspective. What are your envisaged plans to continue supporting local governments in accessing international finance for urban climate projects?
Well, thank you so much indeed, Esther. It's really good to see you again virtually. So what are we doing beyond the IMIF? May I take these headphones off? Does it work? There seems to be a feedback. Do other people, you can take them off. Oh, great. So what are we, thank you. So what are we doing beyond the IMIF? So I think together with United Cities and Local Governments and FMDV and others, we believe there needs to be a financial ecosystem that works for cities and local governments. And we're hearing this from the cities right now. There's a variety of needs to fill this financing gap, and it's not a one size fits all. And I think that we really need to understand finance from the perspective of cities. People often say, well, there's bankable projects here and there's all the money over there. We've just got to bring a pipeline of bankable projects and we'll solve the problem. That's not true. It's very easy for finance to pay for a Holiday Inn, a five-star shopping mall. There are plenty of those around the world's cities. They are bankable projects. What we need are transformative investment finance that pays for things like piped water, public transport systems, affordable housing, things that actually transform a city. And that's different than just a pipeline of bankable projects. It needs a blend of financial solutions, and cities themselves are well aware of this. So the IMIF, that's an equity fund. What that will do is that will finance large pieces of infrastructure in which the IMIF fund manager, Meridian, will take a stake, an equity stake. They will own that over a long period of time. That's how they mitigate their risk. And that's one part of the jigsaw. But there are many other pieces to the jigsaw. For example, IMIF in Kumasi, Ghana, is going to finance the tramway system, a public transport system for that city of 3 million people. Now, most cities of 3 million people need a public transport system. Many do not have one. We're going to get one now in Ghana, in Kumasi, the second city. IMIF will own that, take a stake in that, a 30 or 40% stake, whatever it turns out to be, over many, many years. And that's how that financing will come. Not everybody can do that kind of solution. With Chef Chouin in Morocco, it's slightly different. They require LED solar lighting. It's a much smaller amount. It cannot be financed through the intergovernmental fiscal transfers and own source revenue. So they need some capital expenditure budget. It's possible for us to structure a loan, and we hope to lend to them on our balance sheet together with a domestic bank through what we call a local government friendly loan. So what do we mean by that? So you often see a lot of talk about the impact investment industry that is based around SME finance. SME finance, the exit is 5 years, and the investor wants to walk away with a profit after 5 years. When it comes to local government infrastructure finance, there is a repayment holiday for the first 5 years, and you only start paying after 3, 4, or 5 years once the project has been built and is generating a revenue. Also, local government friendly finance needs to understand that it's the institution that is borrowing, not the entrepreneur. The problem with a lot of the impact investment is it's looking for entrepreneurs. Local governments are not entrepreneurs. They cannot be held personally liable for the financing. So we're working to develop special purpose vehicles, which are kind of companies owned by local governments, or that local governments can have a stake in, that are able to contract this debt and carry a liability on their books, and maybe have collateral through land that can be provided by the local government. So this can create a vehicle that opens up the possibility for that kind of debt finance to local governments. That's another part of this system, and we're working in a number of countries. There are a number of examples of where we've created these special purpose vehicles. A third element of the financial ecosystem that works for local governments, of course, has to be some kind of domestic bond market. So you have most famously, you have that in the United States. If a town wants to build a library, it issues a bond, pays that back at 2 to 3% a year over many, many years. And that's the way the library is funded. Interestingly, the University of Oxford has just issued a 100-year bond at 1%. Now, when I was talking to the mayor of Quito, he was saying we want to build a subway system and we can only get 15-year finance on the loan. So there has to be a way of local governments issuing long-term bonds in domestic currency that can be paid for through the pension funds of those countries themselves without having this foreign exchange risk, which is another one of the problems when you're bringing in investment from outside. That's not easy. So we're working with the government of Tanzania on the first ever municipal bond market in the country, where we hope a number of these special purpose vehicles will be able to float bonds. Tanzanian investors will be able to buy them, Tanzanian pension funds, to move that forwards. Of course, there's also a pipeline of projects, the classical approach, and that's very important. We're working with the ICLEI on that through TAP. We're working with UN Habitat on SDG cities to have a way for investors to kind of, broadly speaking, see what is coming down the pipe. You can have early project preparation to come in, and that can help prepare the projects. But again, I don't think we should see this as a project-focused thing. It has to be a city focus with the city at the center. Another way to bring the finance down to scale and to be able to get it city-friendly is to have what we call these pooled financing across basins. So with the water basins, in the case of water finance. So with the Blue Peace Initiative, we're working on the Gambian River Basin. So you have more than one country, it's a watershed. And there's consolidated water management that spreads across a variety of different towns and cities. And you can provide what we call master plan financing. So some of this is grant, some of it is very profitable, and the very profitable parts that profit becomes the grant for the grant finance parts. That's only possible when you're financing a master plan rather than financing an individual investment. Another example, of course, is with Mayor Yvonne Akisoya in Freetown, who is a really innovative mayor. And with her, we're financing a water solution, again, which is a combination of grant and loan. Now, finally, I think what we must not forget, and what is often forgotten, is the public capital expenditure, public finance. You know, there's often talk about blended finance, bring the private sector in. But every city in the world, be it New York or be it a small village, requires a a significant proportion of public money coming from the central government treasury, because after all, that money was generated by the territory of the country. It has to be redistributed to the territory of the country. To me, that's not the central government giving up money. It's the local governments getting back into their territory the resources that they generated in the first place. It's actually right that that should happen. And so that must not be taken out of the equation. We should not think of private sector finance taking that out. All local governments need that. It's very important. Of course, there's also the own source revenue angle. But just finally on that public finance angle, another program which is very important, well, more than a program, it's a mechanism, is called the Local Climate Adaptive Living Facility. So this is a mechanism. There's 27 countries currently in it. It's welcome to any country to join up. So please come to me if you want to join it. And this is a mechanism for local governments to have direct access to climate finance that comes down through the intergovernmental fiscal transfer system, rather than having to, broker a deal with the Ministry of Environment or have a project. It's about some kind of direct access, because, and I'll finish with this point, because at the end of the day, the figures show that most climate adaptation, the investments required to do that are local government responsibility. And 70% of it is water related. If it's not water, it's land use planning related. When it comes to climate adaptation, you can deliver that at scale effectively through your local governments, because it's already their responsibility to make those investments and to do that planning and to do that work. There's no need to have a parallel project with expensive project vehicles, project management. Give it to the people who know how to do it. That's what the Local Climate Adaptive Living Facility is all about. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, David. And I don't want to interrupt this very, very interesting panel discussion, but meanwhile, we also started to receive questions. I'm very happy to see them. And I believe that the easiest is if I read those for you. And starting with that, there is one question that it's a question to the institutions. Can you give recommendations to cities that are willing to access climate finance? And here, although it's for all the institutions, just because the time is so limited and Augustin has not yet spoken in the second round of discussions, I would particularly like to hear from you if you can give some general recipes, and also maybe you can share some experience from your GAP fund experience. What is a successful project application? What are the key elements of accessing finance?
Thank you, Esther. No, I mean, that's the key question, right? And I think, David said it right. We need to better understand the landscape of climate finance from the perspective of cities. And how can cities really identify which of their ideas should be funded through their own capital budget, which development projects could benefit from long-term loans. So that's really a challenge. What I can give you a flavor of what we are supporting cities with to take them further down this road to tap climate finance. So for example, I mentioned we've been operating for about 1 year, and we are supporting currently 35 cities, and we are supporting cities in a wide range of early stage project preparation, starting with strategy development. So if you look at planning, for example, we support strategic planning, investment planning, spatial planning. And what we see is that those three levels of planning really need to work together. You don't want strategic planning to be disconnected from investment planning. So for example, when cities have developed their climate action plan, the key question is what this list of actions that you have at the end of the climate action plan, how does it go into the city climate investment plan? And we are supporting cities, for example, like Ahmedabad or Addis, that have already developed their climate strategy, to translate this into a capital investment plan. But most importantly, we don't want just those cities to develop one-off capital investment plan. We want those cities to build, to evolve their systems so that they really mainstream the climate investments in their investment plans on a sustainable basis. And that's really a significant challenge. We also are supporting the inclusion of the climate dimension in spatial planning. So for example, in Bogota, we're supporting the city of Bogota to think about how to include low carbon urban development at the neighborhood level through a new program that they have, which they call the Vital Neighborhoods. So really developing investments and urban design guidelines to encourage low carbon development at the neighborhood level. Then we can think also of specific sectoral interventions. So for example, in Panama, we are supporting the city of Panama City to develop transit-oriented development projects around the cable car stations that they are going to develop in the future. In Dakar, we're supporting the development of both urban design guidelines and building energy efficiency standards to promote energy efficient housing. And finally, to give you an example, in Kinshasa, we're supporting the city of Kinshasa to identify opportunities for investment in nature-based solutions and develop a long-term investment plan to actually develop those opportunities. So I hope that gives you some flavor of what the GAP Fund can do to help a city figure out how to access climate finance.
Thank you so much. And maybe just to complement on this, if you can, Jean-Francois, from your perspective also, that what would be your suggestions, the measures that you suggest local governments to overcome the most usual barriers they face when accessing finance?
Very tricky question, because I think the complexity is on all the cycle of local finance. But I think somebody mentioned that the connection with the private sector is really, really crucial. And I think supporting cities to increase the partnerships together with the private sectors and the financial expertise is also very important. And that's what FMDV tries to do through coaching sessions, where we provide technical assistance to cities on their project, but not as a FMDV internally, but we try to identify what are the needs. And then we go to mobilize practitioners from private investors, DFIs, and other financial experts that will provide the advice to the cities in order to reach the bankability. So these coaching sessions are developed during 6 months to 1 year. And after that, we are organizing matchmaking, where the cities can present the initiative and investment needs to a group of DFIs and investors, not only to make a connection for action, but also to create a strategic dialogue between the project needs and the perspective of the project from a financial point of view. And this creates a common culture of dialogue and create opportunities of partnering in the long term, not on the project base, but more on how to structure a project that can attract also the private partners. So this is one example, but again, there are so many critical points to tackle that it's a big challenge to answer it in the global way.
Thanks a lot. And with that, I think I give back the moderation to Georgia, who indicated there's a question from the floor.
Yes, thank you so much, Esther, and also colleagues on the line. We have indeed a question here from the audience. So I'll pass off the microphone.
It's good to be a speaker so that you don't have the mask too much time. My name is Yunus Arık, and I'm the Director of Global Advocacy at ICLEI. I'm also the focal point of Local Governments and Municipal Authorities constituency to the UNFCCC. So I'd like to first of all congratulate you, all my colleagues and partners in this organization of this session. And it was really inspirational. I'm so happy to see progress of the level of achievement we had done 5 years ago in Paris. So there is now much more concrete discussions that things are moving on the right direction. But I want to take the question to the point that we are here in a second phase of Paris Agreement kicking off, starting with this COP. The countries have brought their new NDCs, and in these NDCs, there are much more reference to cities, which means the time for multi-level action has come. That's what we're saying. And we want every country to do that. But the critical point is how to finance this multi-level action. And that is the whole discussion of COP here. This COP is becoming a finance COP. My concrete question would be, what are your proposals? Especially, I'm happy that David has raised his hands, and maybe Esther can also help us to raise this question to the other colleagues on virtual online. What are your concrete proposals to Article 6 discussions in terms of how to make sure sustainable urban development could be part of this new, especially what we call 6.8 non-market mechanism? And I would like to conclude with one important point. Yesterday, there was another announcement from our colleagues from R20, CC35. They've created another budget, which was around a couple of $100 million. This morning, there was an information, and this being discussed in the European study, that for any city beyond 100,000, there is at least a 1 billion euro needed to track to fully to the carbon neutrality. So if it is a city of 100,000 people needs 1 billion, imagine the whole Africa, imagine the whole Asia, billions of dollars, which cannot be sorted by just these equity funds and just these processes. I fully agree with David. So as of Sunday, 31st of October, LGMA announced its roadmap for Glasgow. And number 2 is our localization of finance. And concretely, we are proposing that Article 6.8 lists number of non-market mechanisms. One of them should be sustainable, integrated, urban and territorial development. Can we collaborate with that? Can you help us with that? Is there any other proposals from your side? Let me conclude. In '97, when Kyoto Protocol was written and adopted, the whole market mechanisms, all these emissions trading, joint implementation, none of them was described. There was only one sentence. It was saying that parties agree to create flexibility mechanisms. Full stop. And in 10 years and 15 years, a whole new market exploded. So if we can make sure in Glasgow, in one of the lists of Article 6.8 non-market mechanisms, if we integrated these 6 words, sustainable, integrated, urban, and territorial development, we believe as LGMA and ICLEI, it will explode a huge new door for us. And if we do not open this door, none of those hopes can be materialized easily, because the scale is so big than any of the budgets of any of those funds, any of those processes. So, but I think that's exactly why we are here, to have this discussion, and we still have a lot of days to go, so that in the next couple of days, maybe we can exchange this discussion so that we influence the negotiation outcomes in this direction. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yunus. I don't know who wants to react first.
Thank you so much indeed, Yunus. So I could not agree with you more. It's critical that this is Article 6.8 is dealt with in the right way. And if we reflect back, we can learn from history. So in the Addis Ababa Action Agenda on financing for development, initially, there was no mention at all of subnational finance. It was as if development was only central government and the private sector. But when you read that now, have a look at paragraph 34. Paragraph 34 of the Addis Ababa Action Agenda details the role of cities, regions, local governments in financing for development. A lot of what we're able to do, including the EMIF and other things, comes out of that paragraph 34. Now, it was very difficult to get that. There was a fight to get that. And believe it or not, it was the ambassador of Benin who led the way in the G77 and got the G77 to table this. And then, of course, it got through in the Addis Ababa Action Agenda. When it comes to the Paris Agreement, we were involved in similar discussions. Now, the Paris Agreement was not quite as successful. When you read the Paris Agreement from top to bottom, you don't find too much mention of local governments, regional governance, subnational finance, as if it can all be dealt with separately. Now, there are a couple of clauses in there which are not quite strong enough, but based on those clauses in the Paris Agreement, we now have the local climate adaptive living facility, which is this direct access mechanism for cities to directly access adaptation finance. We need to something much stronger in Article 6.8 than we got in the Paris Agreement. So I would mention that added to your point about this what was it, $1 billion, $100 billion for every city is absolutely right. We saw it yesterday in the discussion in the plenary on breakthroughs, the solar, the wind, this green hydrogen, the transport, the waste to energy, the adaptation finance. So I think we need two elements in there. One is some kind of guarantee facility that enables cities to be able to access capital markets for certain things without impinging on the sovereign liability. This is the fundamental issue. It always comes up that central governments don't like cities borrowing, doing bonds or anything, because when it comes to their own credit rating, the IMF and others will downgrade them if they have indebted cities within their territory, because they believe that that central government will eventually bail out that city, and therefore it's counted against the central government's own credit rating. We need to do away with that. We need to free up capital markets for local government investments, and we need to put words in there that will enable us to develop these kind of global guarantees for cities that don't count on the sovereign, to remove the sovereign guarantee from the equation to enable the city to prepare stuff. Secondly, on the public finance, we need more of these mechanisms like Locale. There needs to be a recognition that public money is better spent on climate related issues when it's spent by cities and local governments than when it's spent by ministries of environment that are regulatory bodies. The bulk of climate finance goes to ministries of environment. They are regulators. It does not go to those who are actually supposed to be doing the implementation. Of course, they can regulate that implementation, but that implementation itself has to be funded. So there has to be a mindset shift when one thinks about climate finance. Local government finance is climate finance. That has to be the motto. Not just local government finance is private sector, or local government finance is the sovereign state. Local government finance is climate finance.
Thank you very much. I think we will need another hour-and-a-half event probably to continue this conversation, but unfortunately we're almost at the end. So before we close and I give the floor to our last speaker for our closing remarks, maybe I would like to go back to Bernard. You kicked us off today, Bernard, very shortly. What do you feel about after this conversation? So we started outlining all the different challenges that are out there. We heard a lot of solutions. We continue the conversation about how can we use the opportunity of being here in Glasgow to go ahead. What is your final thoughts after this discussion?
Well, thank you very much, Georgia. Of course, we have not resolved everything, but I think what is very clear is that all those different strands need to be pulled together. Of course, here in Glasgow, I very much agree with Yunus that at the global level, these decisions need to be taken. We will see if how far the non-market mechanism clauses can be influenced. But of course, there are also other mechanisms that are maybe a little bit softer that can immediately come out of the COP, in terms of, for example, the frameworks for the implementation plans of the NDCs, or the frameworks for the design of the next round of the NDCs. And all those mechanisms, I think, need to be built in there. And I leave it at that.
Thank you very much. So by introducing Bella Ntongonoki is Associate Director of ICLEI Secretariat, I would also like to say goodbye to everyone from my side. And thank you very much for your participation and for the participation online. And thank you to our speakers. And now the very tough job, Bella, of giving us some closing remarks. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you. Indeed, it's quite a challenge to sum up and provide the closing remarks to this very rich discussion and on this very important topic. So let me just start first by just reminding us why we're here, thinking about that. So I actually had the honor yesterday of going to the Glasgow City Chambers and to kind of see and to remember sort of how we are part of history. I mean, this building has more marble than the Vatican City and has been there for decades, since the 1800s at least. And what it really reminded me of is that we're here at this inflection point, really one part of this much bigger picture on how we change the trajectory. And cities, of course, are a critical part of that. They are responsible for 70% of global emissions. They are already experiencing significant climate impacts. 90% of those emissions can be reduced with existing technologies and practices. And so what we really need to do is then understand, how do we finance that? How do we drive that investment? I think the keynote speaker from the beginning talked about the climate finance tracking that my organization, Climate Policy Initiative, has done. So we've tracked recently this year a State of Cities Climate Finance report, which showed that $384 billion of investment is going to cities, but it is far too little compared to the trillions needed, and it's not going where it needs to go. So very little of that goes to rapidly urbanizing regions of sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia in particular, and very little of that goes to adaptation. And so what we are trying to do at the Cities Climate Finance Leadership Alliance is really bring together all of the organizations that are working on these topics, from city networks like ICLEI and FMDV, UNCDF, UN Habitat, the GAP Fund, and really try to address those barriers to that investment flowing, and really bring together all of these organizations to work together to mobilize climate financing at scale for cities. So what we are doing, we've been working to understand the role of national development banks. We've been working to harmonize the approaches of project preparation facilities. We've been working to map financial instruments that are in use all around the world, like what David was mentioning, and to build capacity at the local level, working with ICLEI and FMDV in Mexico and soon Indonesia. And increasing the ambition of all of these organizations by committing to targets under the Leadership for Urban Climate Investment Initiative, which was launched at the UN Secretary General's 2019 summit. So we really believe that we all need to work together. Cities can't do this alone. They don't have the financial or human capacity, and they don't control all of the decisions that they need to, or that need to be made. And so what we need to do is really work with them and come together as a community to really help cities and work all together to with national governments, with local governments, with all of the stakeholders here that we've heard from today, and work together to drive that investment needed. So really appreciate everyone's attendance here, and thank you especially to ICLEI for the organization, and thank you again. Mm-hmm.